Hong Kong lawmaker under fire for disrespecting the tragedy. Doug Jones becomes the first Democrat to win US Senate seat in Alabama in 2 decades, ousting Trump-backed rival Roy Moore. Civic Party lawmaker Kwok Ha-ki has slammed the National People's Congress delegate election next Tuesday as a fake poll. That's after at least 9 pro-democracy hopefuls, including Kwok, were barred from joining the race. Kwok, who refused to declare patriotism in his application, accused the NPC chairman council of pre-selecting the candidates. He said he will file a complaint letter to the NPC Standing Committee Chair Zhang De-jiang and to President Xi Jinping.
In previous NPC elections, they at least made a show of letting the unfavored enter the race, whether from the pro-establishment or pro-democracy camps. That was to show Hong Kong people the elections were competitive. But the situation is so bad now, they're not even bothering with any show.
The candidacies of 49 other people are confirmed, including the controversial SAC delegate of China's top advisory body, Lu Monheng, who had a high profile falling out with former Chief Executive CY Leung. Academic and Election Committee member Roger Wong is the only Pan-Dem who secured the green light. Council spokesman Ambrose Lau rejected claims that they were following a list of names blessed by Beijing. He said 8 Pan-Dem hopefuls were disqualified because their past actions contradicted the statement of patriotism made in their applications. As for the remaining failed candidate, that was due to a lack of nominations. China marked the 80th anniversary of the Nanjing massacre with a conciliatory tone on making peace with Japan. At a commemoration ceremony, top political advisor Yu Zhangsheng described wars as a mirror that teaches people to treasure peace. Wearing a white flower to symbolize mourning, President Xi Jinping was among those at the event in Beijing. The tragedy, which saw hundreds of thousands of people killed, has long been a sticking point in Sino-Japanese relations, as some Japanese politicians and scholars deny it ever took place. Here in Hong Kong, top officials, including Chief Executive Carrie Lam, attended a ceremony to pay tribute to the victims. In Legco, pro-Beijing lawmakers have blasted People Power's Ray Chan for trying to use the massacre anniversary to derail the debate on procedural rule changes. Chan and 2 other Pan-Dems put forward 3 adjournment motions today in hope to delay the council debate on the controversial rule change proposals. Chan's motion put the Beijing loyalists in an awkward place as it called on Japan to apologise for the massacre. All 3 motions were vetoed, and the pro-establishment camp is furious.
It's a way to filibustering. Today marks the 80th anniversary of Nanjing massacre. We have an official ceremony, and he wasn't even there. If he cares about the innocent Chinese that were killed during the Second World War, he should be there.
To the US now, where President Donald Trump has been dealt a political blow after Democrat Doug Jones won the Alabama Senate race. The victory over embattled Republican Roy Moore makes Jones the first member of his party to represent Alabama in 20 years. With 99% of the vote counted, Jones had a 1.5 percentage point lead over Moore, whose campaign was marred by sexual misconduct claims. The Republican, who was loudly backed by Trump, refused to immediately concede. Jones' addition to the Senate weakens the Republican stronghold, giving them 51 votes to 49. That means a tougher road ahead for Trump and welcome momentum for Democrats ahead of the 2018 midterm elections.
I am truly overwhelmed. I am truly, truly overwhelmed. But you know, folks, and you have all heard me say this at one point or another in this campaign, I have always believed that the people of Alabama had more in common than to divide us. We have shown not just around the state of Alabama, but we have shown the country the way that we can be unified.
In what could be the first olive branch in a while from Washington to Pyongyang, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has offered to begin direct talks with North Korea without preconditions. Addressing a think tank in Washington, Tillerson said his side is willing to kickstart discussion with Pyongyang, even if it means just talking about the weather. That's a diversion from a key U.S. demand that North Korea must first accept giving up its nuclear arsenal to be part of any deal.
It's not realistic to say we're only going to talk if you come to the table ready to give up your program. They have too much invested in it. And the president's very realistic about that as well. And so it's really about how do you even begin the process of engagement, because we're dealing with a new leader in North Korea that no one's ever engaged with.
To the Paris Climate Summit, 2 years after the Paris Accord was signed, French President Emmanuel Macron said the battleground is slowly being recaptured with collective action to stem the impact of climate change. Wrapping up the summit, Macron announced 12 non-binding commitments involving hundreds of millions of US dollars. Among them, more than 200 institutional investors pledged to step up pressure on the world's biggest corporate greenhouse gas emitters to combat climate change. And as David Pollard reports, this is part of a new direction climate campaigners are now taking on.
Arnie is back, not to terminate this time, but 2 years on from the Paris Climate Accord for a new start.
We on the subnational level, we're going to pick up the slack and we're going to continue on. Mayors have a lot of powers, governors have a lot of powers, leaders have a lot of power.
And though the most powerful leader of all isn't there after dropping out of the Paris Accord, the message from this Paris summit is it doesn't matter.
The vast majority of the American people want to live by the Paris Agreement, and they want to deal with climate change. And so I think common sense in the end will win out.
The other message from the summit is scenes like this, the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. This was September this year. Last year in the US, similar cleanups already cost $350 billion. But with action to cut greenhouse gases now urgent, new pressure is coming from a new direction. Institutional investors who have $26 trillion in assets under management say they'll use their muscle to force change on some of the world's largest corporations.
The entire financial ecosystem is now in. Let me elaborate on that. 20 of the largest, most globally systemic banks are supporting the recommendations. 8 of the 10 largest asset managers in the world.
That would, say observers, be an overdue but welcome intervention.
Ultimately, the private sector needs to engage with its consumer, the consumer audience, and I think the consumer audience is what will drive climate change measures forward. It's not about governments.
One reason why, perhaps, this summit also has a liberal sprinkling of stardust. Top names from French cinema joining the politicians and philanthropists, along with a former action hero turned environmental champion, as climate change seeks celebrity billing.
All right, well, with Arnie on the case, hopefully there is hope. Coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Banks, casinos and airlines helped propel equities higher ahead of the Fed's expected rate hike. The HSI surged almost 1.5% and rose back above the 29,000 points level. Tech stocks limited the advance though. AAC Tech shed 1.1%, while Sunny Optical Tech fell by 2.6%. A Reuters poll showed home price growth on the mainland is likely to stall in 2018 as a surprise boom in smaller cities is expected to lose steam. The survey indicated average nationwide new home prices would flatline by the end of 2018 after rising a median 2% in the first 6 months from the same period a year earlier. It comes as measures to tighten credit and other property curbs continue to constrain the market. Meantime, the mainland's crackdown on risky micro-lenders might be taking effect, but it hasn't stemmed borrowing demand. New data showed short-term household bank loans almost doubled in November from a year ago to more than $30 billion. The surge suggests households are finding ways around mortgage restrictions for things like credit card debt and car loans. The US, EU and Japan have vowed to work together to fight market-distorting trade practices that have fueled excess production capacity. And there was no hiding who they were pointing the finger at. A joint statement issued by the economic powers didn't single out any country in particular, but it did name several key features of China's practices and policies. It was a rare show of solidarity between the three at the WTO ministerial gathering in Buenos Aires, which has been dominated by Donald Trump's American First trade agenda.
At the moment, consensus has proven elusive. Whether in the 1 day or so we have remaining to find the answers, we can do that. Let's wait and see.
Well, there may still be plenty of complications surrounding the sale of Toshiba's prized chip unit, but the company has removed one major obstacle. Toshiba's managed to settle a long-running dispute with partner Western Digital over the deal. Western was infuriated by a plan to sell the business to a consortium, which included South Korean rival SK Hynix. But they've now agreed to extend their joint chip ventures in central Japan till 2027. Western will now also participate in a new plant slated for next year in the north of the country. Tesla's efforts at convincing the trucking community it can build an affordable electric big rig with a range and cargo capacity to compete with low-cost, time-tested diesel trucks just got a big boost. That's after one major company made a big order of the so-called semi-trucks. Fred Kariyama has the details.
PepsiCo has reserved 100 of Tesla's new electric semi-trucks. That's the largest known order for Tesla's big rig. PepsiCo says the trucks will complement its fleet of nearly 10,000 and help reduce fuel costs and emissions. A dozen other companies, such as Walmart, fleet operator J.B. Hunt, and food service distribution company Cisco, have put in their orders for Tesla's semis. The total number of orders comes to 267 trucks, according to a Reuters tally. Cox Automotive's Akshay Anand.
The Semi and the Roadster looked wonderful, but the Model 3 is their immediate pressing concern. We know there are production issues, and they need to get the Model 3 right so they don't spread themselves too thin. So I think over the next year and a half, whatever it is, the Model 3 is the most critical piece for Tesla's future success, and we'll see how the Model 3 does, and I think that'll kind of dictate where they go with semis and roadsters.
Tesla unveiled the Semi last month. It expects the truck to be in production by 2019. The company is going for a big market. About 260,000 heavy-duty trucks are produced in North America every year, according to research firm FTR.
Still to come when we return from a short break, Donald Trump calls for an end to the green card lottery as US resident from Bangladesh is charged with terrorism.
On the road to becoming the best in the field, we pledge to revamp the world through television. We pave roads between humans and nature.